Have you ever driven all the way home from work, pulled into your driveway, and realized you don't actually remember the trip? Your brain does this to save energy. By building these automatic tracks, it can handle complex routines without you having to consciously think through every single movement. The engine driving this process is a chemical called dopamine. When you complete a helpful routine, your brain rewards you with a chemical signal that says, "That worked well. Let's remember how to do it exactly that way next time." This is a built-in survival mechanism. A healthy internal autopilot keeps us functioning efficiently through our day, freeing up our mental energy for actual problem solving. But because the system is so efficient, it has a blind spot. If the wrong input gets tied into that reward center, the autopilot can be hijacked, and it will stubbornly follow a dangerous route. When certain substances enter the body, they overload that dopamine system. They flood the reward center so intensely that they trick the brain into believing the substance is a requirement for survival, similar to food or water. Once that happens, the brain's internal navigation system locks in. Every impulse and automatic behavior gets redirected towards securing the next fix. Logic, relationships, and negative consequences are simply overridden by this new artificial survival drive. This handwritten recovery workbook shows exactly what this looks like in practice. Right here in the middle, it defines insanity as using drugs day after day while knowing only physical and mental destruction is coming. Willpower often falls short here. The brain is no longer choosing a bad habit. It is responding to what it mistakenly perceives as a basic survival need. Trapped in this cycle, the person suffering becomes profoundly isolated. Their mind is locked into a closed, obsessive loop, where the only voice they hear is the glitched autopilot repeating the same commands. Because their internal controls are compromised, the only way out of the loop is to admit the internal system is broken. They need to look outside themselves and ask an external co-pilot to take the wheel. In recovery programs, this realization is known as Step 2. It requires a person to fully accept that a power outside of their own mind is needed to restore order. The term higher power often causes confusion, but it doesn't have to be religious. It simply needs to be a stabilizing force that the person trusts more than their own compromised judgment. Think of a support group, a sponsor, or a treatment program as a co-pilot. When a person's internal track is looping endlessly, they can align themselves with the stable, straight track of a community that has already navigated the way out. By relying on this external guide, an individual can start to ignore the false alarms and glitched impulses firing off in their own head. They let someone else read the map for a while. That external support system provides something completely absent during active addiction: real, tangible hope that the pain can actually stop. But trusting someone else to guide you when your brain is sounding alarm bells requires a very specific mental posture. It starts with honesty and open-mindedness. A person has to admit that their old way of doing things simply failed, and they have to be willing to try something totally unfamiliar. Then comes willingness. This is the action phase. It means actively committing to follow the suggestions of the co-pilot, even when it feels uncomfortable. Looking at this recovery journal page, we see these 3 principles listed right at the top. The writer notes that paying mind to honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness is how they began to address their beliefs about a higher power. These 3 concepts take recovery from an abstract idea and turn it into a grounded series of practical daily choices. Healing the brain is a slow, gradual process of overriding the old programming rather than an overnight event. Every time a person feels the urge to fall back into old habits, but chooses a recovery action instead, they are physically relaying the tracks inside their brain. You can see that shift documented in these notes. The author describes their first real glimpse of sanity as the moment they called their sponsor instead of sitting alone with negative feelings. With every new, healthy choice, the old chemical loop starves and weakens. Over time, the new, healthy pathway grows stronger and becomes the mind's default route. In this final journal entry, the writer captures the result. By consistently choosing to go to meetings and ask for help, the dark cloud lifts. Sanity returns because the individual built it through consistent, better choices. Long-term recovery is ultimately about learning to face the world as it actually is, without needing a chemical escape hatch when things get difficult. The glitched autopilot doesn't have to be the final word. Through the daily practice of the 12 steps, people find a way to navigate around those old impulses, creating a path that stays clear of the loop. The isolation breaks, the mental tracks are relayed, and a completely new, healthy destination becomes possible for anyone who is willing to ask for a little help along the way.